She was 6 years old, barefoot, and standing between the most feared man in Korea and his own death. She didn't know his name. She didn't know his world. But she looked him dead in the eye and said 7 words that stopped an entire room cold. Sir, there is poison in your food. And Pilkwan, the man who had never once flinched in the presence of enemies, who had buried rivals without blinking, who had not shed a single tear in 15 years, felt something crack open in his chest when he looked at her. Not because she saved him, because of her eyes. He had seen those eyes before, in a mirror, every single morning of his life. He just didn't know it yet. Before we go further on if a child you'd never met walked up and saved your life, what would be your first reaction? Drop it in the comments. And if you're new here, subscribe and turn on notifications. Let's go. The dining hall of the Pilk estate was the kind of room that made grown men remember their manners. 50 feet of polished black marble, a chandelier that cost more than most people's houses. And at the head of the long obsidian table, alone, always alone, sat Jong Pilkwan. He hadn't touched his food. He never ate immediately. He waited, watched, let the steam rise and the silence settle around him like armor. His bodyguards lined the walls like sculptures. Nobody spoke unless spoken to. This was not cruelty. This was simply the order of things. Pilkwan lifted his chopsticks. Down the east corridor in the staff quarters that smelled of floor polish and old wood, a little girl was supposed to be asleep. She was not asleep. Ruby, 6 years old, 2 thick braids, a yellow dress with a paint stain on the pocket, was pressed flat against the greenhouse wall, notebook clutched to her chest, eyes wide. She had gone in to draw the flowers after dinner. Nobody ever bothered her there. But tonight, 2 people had come in whispering. She recognized one voice. A woman, sharp perfume, high heels, always smiling too wide at everyone. The other voice she didn't know. A man, low, nervous. Tonight's the only window. His food. The third dish. Make sure it's the third dish. Ruby didn't fully understand what she'd heard, but she understood wrong. She understood it the way children understand thunderstorms. Not the science, but the danger. She closed her notebook. She ran. If you were Ruby, 6 years old, alone, would you have been brave enough to walk into that room? Tell me in the comments. Oh, the dining room door opened. Nobody had opened that door uninvited in 11 years. Every head turned, every bodyguard reached. But what came through the door was not a threat. It was a little girl in a yellow dress, barefoot, with her notebook pressed to her chest like a shield. Ruby walked straight to Pilkwan's chair. She didn't stop, didn't hesitate. She stood beside him and looked up, all the way up, at the most feared face in Korea and said it clearly, the way her mother had always taught her to say important things. Sir, there is poison in your food. The third dish, I heard them planning it. The room stopped breathing. Pilkwan set his chopsticks down. One quiet click on the table. He turned to look at her, really look at her, and something moved behind his eyes that nobody in that room had seen before. How do you know this? I was in the greenhouse. I heard a man and a woman. She had the sharp perfume. Ruby pointed across the table. Her. Seo Yeonji, his fiancée of 2 years, shot to her feet. Her chair screeched against marble. She's a servant's child who snuck in here, and she is lying. Pilkwan didn't look at Yeonji. He was still looking at Ruby, at her eyes, dark, steady, unafraid. Something about those eyes made his chest feel like a wall with a crack running through it. Eat it. He said it to Yeonji quietly, almost gently. If the child is lying, a king is just food. Eat it. The color left Yeonji's face like water draining from a basin. In the silence of that room, her guilt became the loudest thing in it. Yeonji's knees hit the marble floor, not gracefully, not theatrically. They hit with a crack that made 3 people flinch. Pilkwan, please, I'm sorry, I was desperate. My father's debts, it wasn't supposed to. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't raise his voice. He watched her unravel with the cold patience of a man who had already decided the outcome. Everyone in Korea knew what Jong Pil-kwon did to traitors. Not with his hands, he was far too precise for that. He destroyed them structurally, surgically. He removed every pillar of their life until there was nothing left to stand on. Your father came to me 6 months ago, he said quietly. I cleared his debts, all of them. And this, he glanced at the untouched third dish, was how you repaid that. Yeonji wept, ugly, desperate, completely real. He turned to his head of security. One word, remove her. And then, as if she had simply ceased to exist, he turned back to Ruby. The little girl was still standing exactly where she had been, arms loose at her sides, head tilted slightly, the way children tilt their heads when they are thinking carefully. She was watching him with an expression that was not awe, not fear, something quieter than both. He studied her. You didn't run, he said. You said it was important. So I stayed until it was finished, she answered simply. Something happened then that had not happened to Pil-kwon in a very long time. He almost smiled. Your name, he said. Ruby, you didn't tell me yours. My mother says you should always introduce yourself first. That's basic manners. A breath of silence. Then quietly, my name is Pil-kwon. That's a serious name, she said, considering it like a verdict. You're welcome. By the way, for saving my life? Yes, that. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, I owe you something. What would you like? Ruby's face went intensely thoughtful. The kind of thoughtful that belongs only to children who take decisions seriously. My mommy works here. She cleans. Every night her feet hurt and her shoulders hurt, and she never complains, not even once. But I hear her. She looked straight at him. Can you make her work easier, but still pay her the same? She worries about money even when she thinks I'm sleeping. The room was very quiet. One of the senior maids pressed her lips together. The head bodyguard stared at the wall. Pil-kwon felt something move in him. Quiet, deep, like something shifting at the bottom of a river. This child had used her one wish. On her mother. Done, he said. Yeah, and now I would like to meet her. Will you come with me? He extended his hand, a gesture so unexpectedly gentle it transfixed the entire room. Ruby looked at his hand, then his face. Then she placed her small hand in his with the easy, uncalculating trust of a child who has simply never been given a reason not to. Okay, but can we talk about the big board game in the sitting room on the way? The one with the horse pieces? Chess, he said as they walked. Yes, does the horse really get to jump over everyone? That seems like cheating. For the first time in years, Jong Pil-kwon laughed, low and quiet, like a man who had forgotten he could. The office door opened, and a dais walked in. She had run the moment the whisper reached the staff corridor. Her daughter, the dining room, I'm the boss. And by the time she arrived, she was breathless, heart hammering, hands smoothing her uniform because she had nothing else to do with them. She pushed the door open and stopped. Ruby was on the leather couch, pointing at a chess piece, saying, But why does the castle have a name like a bird? It looks nothing like a bird. And beside her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, listening with complete unhurried attention, was a man. A man whose profile Aday's recognized before any other part of her brain could catch up. The jaw, the particular angle of his nose, the line of his shoulders. The world tilted. Her hand found the doorframe. Ruby looked up. Mommy, you have to meet Pil-kwon. He promised me a wish because I saved his life and I used it for you. And now he's teaching me chess. Pil-kwon had risen. He was looking at her. And the look on his face was not the face of a man meeting a stranger. It was the face of a man watching something that rewrote the logic of the last 7 years walk through his door. What are you doing in Korea? His voice came out quiet, unsteady underneath. Adais opened her mouth. Before she could speak, Ruby tugged his sleeve. We came to find my daddy, so we can all be one big happy family. Mommy said we had to give it a try. I think it's very romantic, actually. She said the word romantic with great relish. The room went absolutely still. Pilkwan turned to Adais slowly. She could not breathe. She watched him doing the mathematics she had been doing for 7 years in a matter of silent seconds. Ruby's age, Chicago. The night that had refused to leave his memory no matter how hard his life had pressed down on top of it. How old? The question fell apart before he could finish it. He already knew. They went to a small cafe around the corner the next morning. After dropping Ruby at preschool, it was warm inside, quiet. 2 cups of coffee between them, and 7 years of silence waiting to be broken. Pilkwan spoke first. I looked for you, he said, for a long time. Adaisy's hands tightened around her cup. I didn't know, she said. I thought we were 2 strangers who had one extraordinary night. I was embarrassed. I left before I could embarrass myself further. You were embarrassed. I had never done anything like that before. I haven't since. Something softened in his face. I woke up and you were gone. I didn't even have your last name. I didn't have anything either, just a first name, a face I couldn't stop thinking about. She paused. 6 weeks later, I found out I was going to have your baby. I wanted to do it on my own. I didn't want to be the woman who tracked down a one-night stand with a pregnancy claim. And you did, he said. Not quite admiration, not quite grief. Something between the two. She's wonderful, Adais said, and her voice went warm the way it always did when she spoke about Ruby. She drew portraits of your entire kitchen staff within 2 weeks of being here. She told your head bodyguard he had a warrior soul. Pilkwan looked down at his coffee. She told me I was rude for not introducing myself. Adais winced. She does that. She was right. A small silence. I came to find you, Adais said. I'm not asking for anything. Ruby deserves to know you, and you deserve to know her. Whatever that looks like. Pilkwan raised his eyes to hers. What if I'm asking for more than that? Pause here. If you were Adaizi, would you have trusted him after 7 years of silence? And if you were Pilkwan, could you forgive not being found? Drop your answer below. Like this video if you're emotional right now. And subscribe, because the next part will break you. 3 months later, Pilkwan reorganized his entire schedule around afternoons with Ruby. He, who had not changed his schedule for anything in 15 years, now kept 3 to 6 every single day untouchable. He taught her chess. She taught him to fold paper cranes, sitting beside him at his enormous desk, narrating every crease with the gravity of a surgeon. He held her hand at the botanical gardens while she examined each flower like a scientist. She fell asleep on his shoulder in the car on the way home, and he did not move for 40 minutes so as not to wake her. Everything was becoming whole, until the morning Ruby didn't come to school. Pilkwan arrived at the preschool at 3 o'clock and was met by a teacher whose hands were shaking. She went to the bathroom at 2:30. We can't find her. We've searched every room. He stopped hearing her at can't find her. What followed was controlled chaos that only looked controlled because Pilkwan refused to allow it to be anything else. Security swept the building. Police were called. Footage was reviewed. He stood in the corridor with his hands clasped behind his back and his face a perfect, enforced mask, while something tore open inside him that had no name and no armor. Adazi arrived in 20 minutes. Her face when she walked through the door, the color draining from it, her whole body going cold, was the worst thing he had seen in years. He crossed the room to her, held her. We'll find her. You don't know that. I know it. She pulled back, eyes red and enormous. How can you know? Because I will not stop until I do. Look at me a days. I will not stop. The text arrived at 7:47 p.m. A photo. Ruby. Small. Frightened. Tear-streaked. Yellow dress crumpled around her knees. And below the photo, 2 words from a number he recognized immediately. Hello, Pilkwan. Seo Yunji. The message was precise, surgical, very much her style even in desperation. Liquidate 15 billion won in shares. Transfer to the attached account before morning, or the child stays missing. Pilkwan read it once, set down his phone. The police chief groaned. She'd used a scheduled message, the phone already abandoned at a construction site 2 hours away. Pilkwan almost smiled. I know where she is, he said. Adeze was beside him instantly. How? He took her face in both hands, his precise, careful hands that had spent their whole life learning not to reach for things. Trust me, he said. Something moved in Adese's eyes. Not blind trust, she was too intelligent for that. Something chosen, deliberate, real. Bring her home, she whispered. I promise. He kissed her forehead, and then he was out the door. He had kept tabs on Yeonji for 3 months after her arrest collapsed. He'd known about the small apartment, the cracked phone screen, the photographs covering the walls. He'd stopped watching a month ago when it seemed that she had disappeared into her own failure. He should have known better. The building was exactly as his records described it. Police moved into position with quiet efficiency. Pilkwan stood in the shadow of a doorway across the street and breathed in the cold night air. He had walked into boardrooms designed to destroy him, had navigated crises that broke lesser men. He had never wanted anything the way he wanted his daughter back. The earpiece crackled. 1 adult female, 1 small child, confirmed inside. He exhaled. He nodded to the officer beside him. They went in. Across the cramped, barely lit room, in a corner behind an overturned table, was Ruby, sitting perfectly upright, arms wrapped around her knees, chin lifted, jaw set. The posture of a child working extremely hard at being brave. When she saw him come through the door, her face crumpled all at once, the way a child's face crumbles when they have been holding it together, just long enough to fall apart safely. He crossed the room in 3 steps and gathered her up. She pressed her face into his neck and wrapped her arms around him with a strength out of all proportion to her size. I tried to be strong, Daddy, she said into his shoulder. Muffled, exhausted, completely real. I tried to be brave like you. I know, sweetheart. His voice was not steady. He stopped trying to make it so. You were so brave. I am so extraordinarily proud of you. I knew you'd come. I told myself. He always keeps his promises. Something in his chest came undone completely. I will always come. Do you hear me? I will always come. Behind him, Yeonji was screaming as they restrained her, raw, cornered, collapsing. Pilkwan didn't turn around, didn't need to. Congratulations, he said as he walked toward the door, Ruby in his arms, voice flat and final. Now I will make sure you never see anything other than 4 walls until the day you die. He walked out. Her screaming faded, and all that was left was the night air and the weight of his daughter against his chest. He called a daze before he reached the car. She picked up on the first ring. I have her. She's safe. She's with me. The sound that came from Adaze was not a word. It was something before words, relief, love, 7 years of held-together strength finally releasing. Come home, she whispered. We're on our way. 6 months later, he stood at an altar in a room full of light. Ruby came down the aisle first. White dress she declared deeply impractical, flowers tucked in her braids, scattering petals with enormous seriousness. She paused to nod at guests she recognized. A dignitary on a procession. She looked up and saw Pilkwan at the altar and beamed at him with a brightness that could have powered the entire room. He felt the tears before he knew they were coming. Then Adais appeared in the doorway. She walked toward him the way she did everything, purposefully, warmly, chin lifted, eyes open. She reached him and looked at his face. She shook her head slightly, the small, fond, exasperated shake of a woman helplessly in love with a man for the exact parts of him he spent years trying to hide. "You're crying," she said very quietly. "I'm not," he said. "Or Pilkwan." "I'm not," he said again. And she laughed, warm and unguarded, and took his hand. Ruby materialized at his other side and tugged his sleeve. "I told you she was the most beautiful person in the world," she whispered, loudly enough for the front rows to hear. "Didn't I tell you? I don't mind sharing." Laughter moved through the room, soft and warm and real. And Yong Pil Kwan, who had once presided over the most feared table in Korea in terrifying silence, stood at an altar with his daughter pulling his sleeve and his bride holding his hand, and laughed quietly in a room full of people who loved them. For the first time in a very long time, the world felt exactly the right size. A Daisy had not known. When she crossed an ocean with a 6-year-old in a suitcase and nothing but a name and a memory, she had not known how it would end. She knew now. This was not the completion of something broken. This was the arrival of something that had always been coming. Their one big, beautiful, extraordinary family. Their happy ever after. And that is how a little girl, a yellow dress, and 7 brave words changed everything. If this story made your heart feel full, or broke it just a little, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that cross borders, break rules, and stay with you long after the ending. And tell me in the comments, who was your favorite character? Ruby, Adaz, or Pilkwan? I read every single one. Until the next story, never stop believing in love that finds its way back.